Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Mentality Project, Mentality Mondays Healthy Masculinity Conversation Series. I'm Chelsea Hill. I use she and they pronouns. I'm one of the health promotion specialists here at the Well. And today we're very excited to have Andre Herbert from Housing and Residence Life as our special guest speaker who is going to be talking about the work that he does and its relationship to healthy masculinity. But as y'all know, before we dive in, we're also joined by my co-host Anthony Siliberto, who will introduce himself and he'll also get us started off with today's conversation.
Thanks, Chelsea. Hey, everyone. My name's Anthony Siliberto, and I am one of the assistant directors in the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Programs, and also a co-lead with Chelsea on the Mentality Project. And we are so excited for our conversation today with Andre. Andre, to get us started, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your position here at Tulane?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Name is Andre Hebert, use he, him, his pronouns. I am the assistant director in Housing and Residence Life. I'm one of a few actually, and I oversee all of our academic initiatives, our curriculum, and our assessment pieces. So typically a lot of people think that the assistant directors supervise the resident directors, but I actually don't supervise any of them directly. I oversee 3 large-scale departmental processes, which is quite exciting in and of itself.
Cool. Awesome.
So just diving a little more about your role, just wondering, why do you do the work that you do, your specialty, and how did you get started? How did you get to becoming where you are in HRL?
Oh, wow. The origin story, right? Such an important question. So originally, I am from South Louisiana, Lafayette, which is about 2.5 hours away. I was born and raised there. I went to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette for undergrad, go Raging Cajuns, and I majored in sociology there. And I think that's really important to my upbringing because I am a first generation college student. And I identify as gay and a man. And those are 2 things that, as I was being raised, I never heard in conjunction with one another. So, being raised in the family that I was raised, which was really Southern, Baptist, white, and really country, for however you define country, really rural. I did not have a really good connection with education, the education system, or a space where I could really be myself, because I was living this life where I was being pushed to do something that just gave me a lot of dissonance. So at the University of Louisiana, I kind of just like dove in. I got involved. I started hanging out with people that I had never met. I got engaged in student organizations, leadership, the queer community at UL. And I was living still at home. So it was a huge difference in being at home and then going to this, liberating college campus, which, if you look as an outsider, is it really liberating? It's still Southern Louisiana, but it was a great experience for me to get involved in the field of higher education. And whenever I was there, all of these student leadership opportunities really had me thinking about what I wanted to do post-college. I had never been to college before. People who I was raised with had never went to college. So I didn't know what I was doing in college. My mom just told me that I had to go. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm here. What do I do? Or what do I do with this degree? And then student affairs and higher education just kind of fell into my lap. I was working in the orientation office, and my first supervisor kind of opened my eyes to this world and was like, this is what I do. This is what this field does. Is this something that's of interest to you? And it actually brought me a lot of joy being on a college campus. It was a place where I could be authentic. It was a place where I could impact other people's lives. I could get involved. I could change people's perspectives. I could change my own perspective. I was challenging myself. A college campus in and of itself to me now is a transformational environment if used properly and appropriately. So that led me to the field, and I went to Ohio State for grad school to get my master's in higher education. And that was, a whole nother experience. It was my first time leaving the South, seeing the Midwest and what that was about, specifically Columbus, Ohio, which is a gem in and of itself. And then after I graduated there, I went to Chicago, the best city in the country, I think, personally. And I started working there. And I worked at Northwestern University, which was a really amazing opportunity to live in the Chicagoland area and do housing work and be a resident director, oversee an area. And so all of that really came together really beautifully whenever I was looking for my next role. I had finished a couple of years there. I was looking for another functional area, really, but a place and an area where I could work on my skills and my strengths and my things that excited me. And what excites me is building structure and being intentional and strategic with goals, objectives, and assessment. That's really exciting to me. And so whenever I saw this opportunity at Tulane, I was really moved to apply and put my name in the hat because it was something that I was really excited about. Now, I will tell you, I never in a million years would have moved back to Louisiana. To this day, I still question why I am back in a state that has really caused me harm and been hurtful to me growing up. But I'm really blessed to have this opportunity to work at a place that I actually really do enjoy being at. And I'm doing work that has a large impact on the lives of students. So, I mean, to hopefully be brief, I work with a residential curriculum. I build engagement strategies and thoughtfulness behind the experience we give our students. I bring a team together to make sure that they understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then I work on the back end externally with campus partners to continue to form and maintain relationships in the residence halls. And then I work with assessment to make sure that we are doing what we say we do and we're assessing it every step of the way. So it's a really, really exciting job. I think that it makes complete sense as to why I'm in it, because it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I hope that, that shows through my engagements. That's a long answer to what I do and why I do what I do.
It sounded all relevant. It
Okay,
sounded
good.
like all those pieces came together to get to you to where you are today. So no, we needed all that context. So thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And I love hearing about where you have been and where you want to be. I went to grad school at Ohio University, so visited Columbus quite frequently of the Athens community. So definitely love Columbus and need to visit Chicago now that you think it is the best city.
Literally.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that off camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
Best city.
Diving into some things around masculinity now, what defines masculinity to you and what is your connection to healthy masculinity?
Masculinity to me is how I perform my maleness or my manness. And yeah, I'm going to leave that definition there, right? It is just how I perform and how I express myself, knowing that I identify as a man. I think, as I was looking over this question, I had a hard time identifying healthy masculinity, which was like really striking to me. Because I do think that there are areas where our masculinity is healthy and helpful. But I think that masculinity as a concept and health as a concept are so subjective. So it's really hard for me to say what healthy masculinity is. I think for me, I see healthy masculinity when I see people expressing themselves in a performative way, and their gender in a performative way that's authentic to themselves. I think masculinity has it's deeply rooted in how men perform and the hierarchy of a male-dominated world and society. And I think that's really problematic in a lot of ways. And so the way that I have reconceptualized masculinity is how someone who might identify as a man or male or have male tendencies express that maleness regardless of your gender identity, right? So I might identify my gender to be something that is other than man or male, but I can perform my gender. I can express my gender in a way that is masculine by wearing certain clothes or by growing facial hair, if that's even, stereotypically masculine, or I think we're going to talk about this later, but like these stereotypical masculine traits, however you are expressing yourself authentically. And if that is the way that you feel comfortable in expressing your masculinity, then that's healthy, because that is what's healthy for you. I will also say that being from the South and being a gay man, the way that someone expresses their healthy masculinity might be something that's harmful to me, and might be harmful to other people of other marginalized identities, particularly trans people. And I would absolutely argue people of color. And we can also dive into that as well. So yeah, I think that's really subjective. And again, I have a really hard time pointing to someone and saying that's healthy masculinity to me. I don't think I have an answer. I can't say that I saw healthy masculinity in my family. Even my friends that identify as male, even myself, like I don't think that I have really healthy masculinity or masculine characteristics or expression or techniques. So it's really subjective to me.
I appreciate, it's not a trick question, just wondering how you view masculinity. And it is hard to really pinpoint it because it can be seen, like, I think ultimately you're alluding to it being an energy within all of us. We both have masculine and feminine energies, and being okay with tapping into, like, I identify as a female, but sometimes I express, more masculine, and that's okay because that's an energy that we all have inside of us. And the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine can't be without the other. So,
exactly.
So yeah, it's something we're all. It's a journey for all of us for sure. So.
And I don't really think that people. I think that that's one of the learning pieces, right? Is the unthinking. And it's an active step, right? It's not something that I can just like learn, like how we learn different things. It is quite literally having to turn off that thought, right? Actively unthink the way that we perceive these concepts and rethinking with a new mindset how I might express myself. I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate the perspective of healthy masculinity isn't always healthy, right? It could be a concept where we think is healthy, but it also can cause harm. So that thinking and education is extremely critical in understanding, like, how are my actions affecting someone else.
Right. Right.
I think that's a piece that, we haven't been able to talk about yet with the guests, and I'm so happy that you pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that we're going to get to this is how does that show up in our work, especially in like geographic location or in a political sphere, in the landscape that we're working with. Yeah, go ahead.
How about masculinity showing up in your work as far as in HRL and or in your personal life? You kind of spoke on this, saying that you didn't really see healthy masculinity in your childhood and things like that. So just wondering your experiences on that and the role that you certainly are holding right now.
Yeah, I think from a professional standpoint in housing and residence life, I think that it's not, to me, it's not surprising, but it's also not private that our senior leaders are mostly male. I mean, if we look at the hierarchy and the organizational structure, these folks identify as male. So starting with me, right? I'm an assistant director. I identify as a man. One of my other assistant directors is also male. Our associate director supervisor is a male. His supervisor, the director, is a man. His supervisor, the assistant vice president of student affairs, is a man. Our vice president of student affairs is a man, and our president is a man. And let's just go one step further. We're all white, with the exception of one assistant director who is multiracial. So I think that how it shows up, I mean, it doesn't not show up, right? Like it's ever present, and it's prevalent. So much so that it is almost, so much so that it is so evident in team meetings when most of our resident directors are female, that leadership team is inevitably man. So like we by definition are like mansplaining, right? Like we are taking up most of that space to get things done, to accomplish tasks, to bring down, delegate directives. It's a male dominated department for sure. And I think, to be frank, it is consistent with our field that the higher up you get, the more male you get. And I think that there are some nuances there that could be elevated and raised along that topic. So I think that it's something that we're continuing to combat, is not only how does maleness show up and overpower the space, because just by positionality, it's overpowering the space, along with how is whiteness and white supremacy culture overpowering this space, because we know that these symptoms of white supremacy culture connect, I would argue, very beautifully with the tenets and the stereotypes and the culture of what masculinity and these power dynamics play in to a department. So I think it's really tough and challenging, but not impossible, to be in spaces and recognize when these dynamics are at play, which is usually all the time, and how we're creating space for other voices to be heard. And whenever I say these things, I feel really weird because it's like, it's buzzwords, right? Like it is, yeah, we create space for other voices to be heard. Is that true? Is that actually happening in practice? I think I want to say yes, but I'm also a guy and a man in a space, in a position that has counterparts that are also male, and leaders that are also identifying as man. So it's really hard to say those definitively. But I will say that what has been really nice is to have spaces where we have to talk about gender fluidity for our students, and being able to acknowledge, I don't know how to really talk about this because I don't have to talk about this often. And so it's really being confronted um, in these scenarios and in these situations where leaders that are not men or our resident directors are raising issues and making us aware of issues and different perspectives, where I do think we do very well is taking the time to just sit with that and being like, all right, that's a different perspective. I don't really know what that means for us, but I'm going to take time to like think about it. And I respect you and want you to voice your opinion and your perspective. So I really do feel confident in our ability to welcome those perspectives, and or while we are still a pretty male dominated leadership sphere. And that's been, I think that's been challenging. I mean, consistently, whenever we have retreats, whenever we have these large department meetings, it is sometimes a point of discussion where we're owning the fact that, okay, the men have been taking up a lot of this space. How can we not do that? Because that's not necessary right now. In my year that I've been here, and obviously I only have a couple of other experiences to compare that to, I will say that I am delightfully surprised that I can operate in a space with other men that have some sort of awareness of what masculinity is and how it can be, like we said, harmful, where we can at least talk about it and be like, we don't need to engage like this. Like, this is not our space to do that. We need to like take a step back. And I've been really grateful for my team in being able to at least be open to that, because a lot of other spaces that I've been in, they don't even think about it. Like, it's been just so culturally assimilated or socialized that it's just not a point of conversation. And that really hurts the people who do not identify as male in that space. So that's how it shows up, right? Like, our leadership is all male. So it's hard whenever we're trying to get different perspectives. And whenever that does happen, we are obviously very grateful and take time to actually sit with that perspective that might be different than ours and see how it connects or doesn't to our own. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. And personally, I mean, I want to be cognizant of time, but personally, masculinity shows up. I feel like I have much better, because that's triggering to me. Personally, it is the men. Like, the men have to do the yard work. The men have to work. The women don't. The men have to make more money. The men have to do physical labor, manual labor. The men play with trucks and toys. The men fight. Like, it's like a thing to like wrestle and like do things with other men. Like, that's like a form of expression. And it's so almost comical to me that if a woman tries to do any of those things, it's like, oh, why are you doing that? Mm-hmm. And if a man tries to do anything other than that, it's, oh, you must be gay. Or
immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, immediate, like nothing, no questions really asked about it. I remember my grandmother, my father's mother, we always lived in the same neighborhood, and she had a big yard, and the yard work is just a really heightened example to me, because I was the one that always had to go cut the grass, because I was like the most open to helping. Like I was the helper. And my dad was like, you need to go cut the grass. Like that's what you need to do for your grandmother. And my other cousins never did any of that. And it was really interesting because I didn't like that just wasn't what I wanted to do. Like I would much rather help my mom cook in the kitchen or help her budget. Like that was fun for me. And so he would make me go do these things. And every time I would ask why or complain, he would say, it's what boys do. Like you have to go do that. It's what you need to do for your grandmother. Like and I'm like, I don't think that I think that I can contribute to this family in many other ways. And I never said that because I didn't know the words to be like, no, actually I want to do this. But it always was so weird to me that I had to do these things. Or like I couldn't play with clothing. Or I couldn't put makeup on my niece, right? Like that's just I couldn't be good at that. God forbid I tried to put like lip gloss on like my 5-year-old niece.
God forbid.
So it's like those instances that really sit with me about how masculinity shows up. And where I say that healthy masculinity was really hard to come by for me because it's so subjective, I will say that like a stereotype of masculinity is like the provider for the family, like the men have to go out and provide. And I will say that my dad was the provider. He was the one that made the money for the family. So much so that it would almost kill him. If he was sick, he was still going to work.
Yeah.
Because there was no other way that we were going to make money. So it's like instances like that really complicate masculinity for me, because I was raised in a household that my dad did all of the work and provided for the family, which he did a phenomenal job doing. But it's a problematic responsibility to me. I'm like, other people can provide for a family. But I really, on the other hand, I really appreciate my dad for being the provider for my family. So that's the dissonance that I talk about.
Definitely some mixed messages too that you received growing up. I imagine as a masculine identified person, it's like, man, do I take care of myself as well? It's just self-sacrificing, just tough it out, be brave. I can't cry about nothing, just it's all on me. So yeah, that's real. And it just, as you were speaking, it just, messages that were coming to me is that there's so much that we need to unlearn about what masculinity looks like, and there's so much that we need to heal as our masculine identified folks. We really need to be pushing our masculine identified folks to start healing and just talking about what's happened, because obviously it's not just healthy masculinity is not just a feminine identified problem. It's everyone's problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think it goes so much beyond. I'm sorry, Anthony.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think I think that I was going to talk about this later, but this concept of like fragile masculinity, right? Like whenever men, at least the way that I see it in action is whenever a man or a masculine identified person is so offended, are like viscerally reacting to something that is so unmasculine that they have done or experienced, that it limits them cognitively from welcoming a different experience into their space. And for me, I think that is it saddens. Like I have no other word to say besides it is just so sad, and it makes me sad. If it wasn't, I will also say, if it wasn't for me leaving the South, like fashion right? Like fashion or emotions. Chelsea, you mentioned something about crying. It wasn't, I mean, I think I've seen my dad cry 2 times in my life, 2 times maybe.
Never seen my dad cry.
It wasn't a thing. My mom, on the other hand, every day.
Yes.
That's a joke, but you know, it's to show the contrast.
Yeah.
When I moved to the Midwest, oh, perfect example. When I moved to the Midwest, skinny jeans. Men were wearing skinny jeans, and I'm like, are you gay? Like, that's the first thought that I had was, oh my God, I'm in a space where people can like wear skinny jeans. And I'm like, and then I interact with people and they talk about like the guys talking about their girlfriend, and I'm like, oh my God, I have been so socialized to believe that men can, because I wanted to wear skinny jeans in college. I wore skinny jeans and everyone was like, why are you wearing skinny jeans? Do you want to be a girl? Are you gay? And by that time I was out. So I was like, hell yeah, yes, I'm gay. And this is how I express my gayness. If it means I'm gay, I'm gay. And so that was all I had in my world. That when I moved to places where men just dressed differently and in comfortable clothes, I'm like, oh, so you must be gay because I dress like this and I'm gay, so it must mean you're gay. And then I was like, wait, so okay, so you can dress like this and still be straight and still be a man. And oh wait, you are asking me questions about my emotions. I've seen you cry. Like, it's just so, the bubble that we live in, and masculinity is so fragile that even for me, someone who had to combat masculinity, and I like to believe that in college I was pretty aware of what masculinity was.
Yeah.
Even someone like me going to a place like Chicago or Columbus, Ohio, which who would talk about Columbus, Ohio like that? But you know, these places, to see masculinity expressed so differently than what I'm used to is really like, it is so transformational for me to be like, wow, even I had this underlying idea of what masculinity meant subconsciously because it was playing out in these weird, very strange ways. So I think that it really limits us whenever we are rigid in these gender lines and these gender expression lines and expectations. We have so much more to say about that, but I think that's something that was really relevant while you were talking, Chelsea.
And I think, you know, we are so socialized to have that mindset, right? Like, they're wearing skinny jeans, so they must identify the same way I do. They talk a certain way. They perform a certain way, even with like hand movements or how they walk, how they talk, all of those pieces where for a lot of non-identified individuals, it's like, oh, this is our association with who they are.
Right.
And yeah, it's like extremely problematic. And it's those learning points that really make the difference and be like, not everything, you know, I grew up knowing is true.
Right.
And like
Everything's a lie.
Yeah. Like, but some things do need to be unlearned. And I think for today's students, like, that is such an important concept. And like, especially with the populations we work with, and like having conversations about like, who are you, or like, who do you want to authentically be, right? Like, I think college is one of those transformational points for a lot of people. But I still think that our students feel like they need to perform in a box, right? So we talk about the man box all of the time, but like, I really do think that our students feel like they have to fit a certain image, whether it be like the most high achieving, some my peers are double majoring, let me triple major, like I need to be the best in like this field and all of those things. So I'm curious, and this is, you know, for Chelsea or Andre, how do you see students still fitting the stereotypes of what masculinity is on the college campus, and specifically working at Tulane, or, you know, at your undergraduate institutions or any institutions you've been at?
You know, Chelsea, did you want to go?
Feel free. Feel free.
Okay. Anthony, I'm really glad that you said that, because honestly, it's coming up on like 10 years that I've almost been out of college. And already in those 10 years, I continue to see an evolution of how students show up to spaces and perform their gender or sexual identity. I will absolutely own and name that in different spaces that I've worked, men are showing up in different spaces than how I showed up on a college campus, and I think maybe how men showed up 10 years before me. So I do think, and I say that particularly because I have nieces and nephews, and it's really fun as an uncle to talk to them about what they're learning and how they come to understand things. And I'm talking to my godson who is 13, 14, and talking to his sister that identifies differently sexually, that is multiracial, how he shows up as a man, as a boy, and how that's different than how I was ever raised. So I think that are masculine tendencies still showing up on a college campus today? Absolutely. And I don't think that they're going away anytime soon, because like Chelsea said, yin and yang, there's not one without the other. And unfortunately, we live in a world where the dichotomy is real. And I will say that it has been fun and enlightening to see men show up to these spaces differently than how I showed up to spaces 10, 15 years ago. And it's really cool to see other male identified folks show up to college campus with a different understanding of what gender and sexuality is, because I think education is working, it is evolving, and I think that these topics are being more talked about, widely talked about, than they were even when I was growing up and learning what it meant to be a man or a boy in the South. So I think it's absolutely still showing up. And problematic tendencies, right? Fraternities, I can talk about the way that men treat other people, women, trans folks, the power dynamics at play. Absolutely. That even we see it in the conduct world. Go ahead. What'd you say?
I said athletics.
Athletics, right? In the conduct process, how they're physically showing up in buildings, right? Like we have a few buildings that are exterior facing, right? Like you get to your room from the outside. Obviously, Andre, that was redundant. Like guys will go with their shirts off and just like sunbathe on the balcony. And I'm like, what a public display of your gender. Just like out there. Meanwhile, I don't see female identified folks doing that much. Maybe on a really nice warm day, like people turn, the green spaces into like a little beach or a little sunbathing area. Or they have little lunch dates on the courtyard, which is really cute. But it's really interesting whenever like a guy is just like lounging out half naked, just there. I'm like, oh, okay. I know where this goes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Chelsea, did you have anything to add with that?
Yeah, just echoing a lot of what Andre said. Yeah. It is evolving. I want to say, as I was growing up, I didn't have no conversations about healthy masculinity or just about the concept of masculinity in general. It was, you're a woman, you're a man, learn your role, and that's that. And so I do appreciate how now we're having, conversations like the gender unicorn, where we're dissecting that gender is really, it's it's interconnected, but also very complex and very diverse, and it's unique to each individual live. And so I appreciate how we're having conversations that someone's expression does not automatically, equal their sexual attraction. Like that's so important. And so, yeah, I definitely, masculinity is still a thing. And like Andre was saying, it's going to take a lot of uprooting and lots of education, but it's working. We just have to continue to hit that tipping point of where everyone is having these conversations. Everyone is seeing the importance of why we need to be talking about being vulnerable, being authentic, and just expressing yourself of who you are. So that's what I would add.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I just think, the education is so important, and how we navigate reaching relations about having the conversations and opening up their eyes to, the work that we are doing and the work that can be done.
Yeah. And I think just having, I would also say that, it's really hard whenever you try to have a conversation about masculinity with folks who identify in a masculine way, especially around healthy masculinity, because to them, the way that they show up could be healthy, right? And I think that it's so important to navigate that conversation in a very cautious way, because words matter, right? And it's really hard, right? Like we don't want to, it is so easy, I think, stereotypically, for a man confronted with something very emotionally conflicting to shut down and to turn this barrier off and tune out. We see this a lot with whiteness. And I think that it's very important to, when drawing someone into that conversation, to use the right questions to reflect their behavior, have them do a lot of the work in owning and taking responsibility and uprooting these like deeply, deeply internal and internalized concepts that is extremely raw and uncomfortable to deal with. And so I think that it becomes challenging, and which is one of the reasons that I love this work so much, is because we can do this in a right, and I don't know what's right. We're like, what's right, what's wrong, but we can do this in a way that is reflective and that's restorative, right? Like you need to first know how this is impacting you and the world around you. Really figure out where those roots are and then start chipping away at them. And I think that it can be done. I mean, it's being done, and it can be done. And I think that for a male identified person, it's really hard when confronted with something that is so against the grain to be like, I just can't do it, and I'm going to shut down. Instead, like, I need you, that is going to hurt you and everyone else around you. So I need you to sit with being uncomfortable for a little bit, and like, let's go on this journey together. And what's beautiful, and I don't think this is spoken enough, it is so liberating when you can just open your world to expressing yourself in so many different ways. You find so much more joy and excitement and creativity whenever you can throw away this conception of I have to act and look this way because society has told me to. And you can be like, my nails, for example, guys don't paint their nails. I love how my nails look painted. I'm like, this is so freaking cool. I love that I can paint my nails. I don't really give a shit if any, excuse my language, I'm so sorry. I don't really care if,
We're adults here.
if guys are not allowed to paint their nails. I don't really care. I'm going to paint my nail because I want like, this is how I feel like I can express myself. I really like how my legs look, so I
Mhm.
want to showcase my legs to people.
Mhm.
Because it's a part of my body that I feel really happy with. And I'm like, men, and that's a really hard road to go down to too. That can be problematic. So owning that. But I think, this goes to sexuality as well. When you limit yourself to only being this way and not really loving the fluidity that is expression and that is gender, it is almost isolating. It is limiting, because you are not opening yourself up to an infinite amount of creative juices, and
Versus
opportunities
abundant.
to express yourself.
Yeah.
What would a world be like if we didn't really say I identify as this, although that is important to a lot of people, but we expressed ourselves in a way that gender wasn't the point of contention, right? Like I can identify, whether it's socially dictated by what my genitalia is, or a cognitive understanding of who I am on the inside. No matter what that is, how I express myself creatively, artistically, physically is okay. And that it is just, it's opening. It is literally freeing. If we can live in a space where we can do that.
Yeah,
And
I think it's just wild to think there's only just one way on
Mhm.
how things should be. Like, how boring is that? You only have one option,
Right.
one sexuality, I don't know, one ice cream flavor. It's like,
Mhm.
right.
it's wild. And I think right now you're actually going into a good segue into, you already kind of started talking about this, but being a positive role model for
Mhm.
how one can destigmatize what masculinity should look like. And so I appreciate you already talking about just being yourself, being authentic, and just if you want to continue on, or if there was some other tips that you could also provide as well, that would be awesome.
Positive role models. Again, very subjective way of how we look up to someone and why and what pieces and characteristics we take from that person or an artifact or a historical piece. Um, yeah, I say what I wrote down when thinking about this is we have to unthink the binary system. I think that it's limiting
Mhm.
whenever we think, Chelsea, like you said, there's only one way to do this. Or even two, if we want to look at a dichotomy of things, right? This way or that way. I think um, there's a little bit, Chelsea, you said this earlier, but like there's a little bit of everything in us. Um, and for me, and it is quite all right if people do not agree. I appreciate those conversations, but like sexuality and gender, I don't think are always defined. I think that they can evolve and change. I think that it again, it's very limiting to um, only say, you know, or do something. Like, to experience life is to open yourself up to all these opportunities, at least in my opinion. And so I think that to look for a role model is to look for someone who expresses themselves authentically, yes, and in a way that is almost unorthodox, that is unconventional, and it's not saying that I have to look up to someone who's doing something that's so weird and strange and something that aggravates me, but like looking at that and being like, why is that strange to me, and being reflective. I think that people can be really liberated if they just have an internal conversation with themselves and allow their brains to kind of expand. So unthink the binary system. I think men in general, if I can use this platform, just need to do better. We say that all the time, but like, just do better. Not everything has to be so hard and rigid. You can show emotions. It's actually really good. And um, Brene Brown said this. I read this quote in 2014 and I wrote it on a post-it and it's still on my bulletin board to this day. But it says, the courage to be imperfect leads to connection. And I think that it is so important for us to not strive for perfection. Like that is an unrealistic goal, at least for me. Like I don't want to be perfect. I actually am okay being imperfect. I'd much rather be connected. I'd much rather feel connected with imperfect people than try to be perfect by myself. Because I'm always going to be comparing and looking for perfection elsewhere. I'd rather us all just be imperfect and like have a really good badass time together imperfectly.
I love that. I love that. I think like it also goes back into like living in a world where we don't have to second guess everything that like we do. Like being okay with like, if I want to cry and that's how I'm feeling, that's okay. And not thinking like, what will people think if I do that? Goes back to like a lot of what you were sharing, and I appreciate that so much. And the imperfect part, yes, times 1,000. We have had such a great conversation with you today and would love to continue the conversation in another episode if you would be down to do that. And just like before we leave today, what form of this work would you like to see continued on campus at Tulane?
Oh my goodness, just this, a space to talk. I think I in grad school, we learned about different ways of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of those ways is indigenous ways of knowing. There are so many lessons that have been forcibly lost by the eradication of our native folks to this land because all of their history was by word of mouth and tongue. And there is power in story sharing and storytelling and sharing a story. It's historical, it's political, it is personal, it is intricate and very intimate, and it's education, right? It is what we do. And so what I want to see continue is this, talking about masculinity, talking about, I mean, for me on a broader scale, talking about gender and sexuality, right? Like they're different, and there's different forms of it. I think that would be really amazing. And I really appreciate the work that you two do, making sure that in a global pandemic, you're still providing people access to hear different perspectives on masculinity, and how it shows up and how people can complicate it and really grapple with the messiness of it to like form their own definition and way of expressing it. So that's really cool. So don't stop doing that. But this is really cool. And I would love to join again whenever.
Thank you. Definitely enjoyed today's conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So many takeaway points. So I really appreciate it. Before we wrap up today, did you want to plug any housing and resident life information as in your social, or how we can stay up to date with y'all and the work that you're doing, and also end us with any last takeaway or any last words?
I really appreciate you opening that space for me to do that. There's always a lot happening in housing and residence life.
Mm-hmm.
You can always check out our website. You can always stop by Irby right now on the first floor. There's some really cool construction happening. So fingers crossed, fall of 2022, we'll have 2 brand new buildings to welcome students in. No, I think that's it. There's no plug, just get involved, stay engaged. And for anyone who might be listening that lives in the residence hall, like, please talk to us. Like we want to be in community with you. It's really hard and challenging to like live here and like stay in your room, like engage, like we want to be with you. We want to be in community. And we're here, this is what we do and we're happy to do it. And just thank you two for allowing this platform to be something that's prioritized. I think it's really important and needed.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great. Y'all have a great day. I appreciate you both so much.
Yes, thank you. Enjoy your lunch hour.
Yes.